Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. I'm your host, Rick McCann, broadcasting live today from Studio A of our Charlotte, North Carolina corporate office. A lot happening, so sit back, strap in, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the LP Zone, Loss Prevention Zone, where everything is going to be about retail security, loss prevention, uniform mall security, asset control and prevention, and all things retail, including organized retail crime. This is a production of Private Officer International, a private security and law enforcement organization. And I'm your host, Rick McCann. We talk on this show about anything and everything related to the retail industry and the security aspect of preventing losses, whether that be from theft or slip and falls or fraud or by other means. And this week, our topic is one of concern, as many prosecutors, legislators, and politicians no longer want to consider shoplifting, even those situations that would include large amounts or use of force in trying to obtain those goods, or other means. Many of our unfortunate local prosecutors just don't want to prosecute these cases anymore. So that's what this case is, this case study that we're doing is all about, and that's what this radio show is going to be all about. The sweeping changes coming to shoplifting prosecution. Now, just this past week, Senator Nancy Skinner wrote Senate Bill 82, and that's a measure to prevent relatively most property thefts where a perpetrator has used force or fear to go uncharged with robbery, which is a normal process in most states when a person commits a shoplifting and uses any force to obtain those goods. That elevates that shoplifting, whether that be a misdemeanor or a felony, into a felony robbery. Senator Nancy Skinner says that's unreasonable, when all they meant to do was to steal some little item, and now they're facing a serious charge of robbery, a felony that could land them behind bars for, in some states, up to 10 years for robbery. Senator Skinner, a Berkeley Democrat, says that's foolish. It's a misuse of the courts. It's a misuse of incarceration just because the person tried to steal some items from a store and police used a law to escalate that relatively minor crime in her eyes to a felony. Currently, there are several states who have either written current law or reviewing law to reduce the seriousness of shoplifting, even in large amounts, those that would deem it to be a felony. According to Skinner, a bill that was created in the 1980s when a man named Curtis Estes walked into a Sears store in Vallejo, California, wearing a T-shirt and jeans, and walked out wearing a lot more, including a down vest, a corduroy coat that he had pulled off the rack and, of course, did not pay for it. And then after committing this theft, which was just a misdemeanor at that time, it was all escalated into a robbery when he was confronted by store security and pulled out a knife. Not only did he pull out a knife, but he threatened the loss prevention agent as he tried to escape capture. According to police statements, he even threatened to kill the security agent, but eventually gave up and was led back into the store and prosecuted for armed robbery and received a substantial prison sentence. Now, this case is being looked at by legislators and prosecutors not only in California but elsewhere as they look at what was just turned into a serious felony that would land not only this suspect in prison for a substantial amount of time, but others who would commit a similar act. While brandishing a weapon generally is a misdemeanor in many states, it can be a felony when we're talking about committing a robbery or a violent act against another person or putting that person in fear. And that's why some states are looking at whether or not to charge shoplifters with armed robbery or even robbery at all, when all they did was commit a misdemeanor or a minor offense, but use some level of force to try to escape. And that includes just pushing a store employee out of the way. As we all know, felonies mean years and years behind bars, and in some states where they have a 3-strike rule, that could put them there for many, many years and possibly even lifetime. While all of this sounds like it would be a bit too much in most cases, when a person robs another of money or goods by use of force, a weapon, or fear, in all states, they're charged with robbery. It doesn't matter if it's an individual or if it's a retailer. So why should it be different if this person used force, a weapon, or fear against an individual, or if they did the same thing to evade a shoplifting detention or arrest? In a similar case, an appeals court ruled that the use of the force deemed it a robbery by statute. And even on appeal, said that force, whether through fear or physical touch or production of a weapon, would be consistent with charging a person with robbery. It is important to understand touching someone or getting in their face and saying, "I'm not going back with you," and pushing the person to the ground, punching, striking, or producing a weapon. Many of our prosecutors across the country in the last 5 years have also lifted many of the statutes that allow a shoplifter to be charged with a felony for between $200 and $500 of stolen product. Now, in many states, they have increased those thresholds and made it a misdemeanor, in many cases, well over $1,000. In several states, the individual must have been charged previously with a shoplifting of a felony amount before they can be charged with a felony again. It is no secret that in recent years, especially in the last 5 to 7, since the riots truly first began in Missouri, that we are seeing more and more activists, more and more legislators, and our own state prosecutors either bowing down to the demand of certain local citizens, or they themselves have become activists. More, not less than, but they are trying to be part of this group who really want to do away with law enforcement, prosecution of most crimes, and even now, states are working toward using unarmed police to conduct traffic stops. States such as Virginia, where I live, and North Carolina, and even as far south as Georgia and Alabama are looking at eliminating some of their statutes, rewriting statutes, and this is outrageous. In fact, just in the last month, there was a call, and I believe this was in Georgia. I don't want to say that it was exactly, but I believe that it was. There was a call by several legislators to stop prosecuting all minor shopliftings, and in fact, and on the first break, I'm going to look this up to be sure, there was even a call not to call the police on black shoplifters. On minor thefts, let them go, was the cry. Well, this is certainly shocking, disappointing. This is the way our country is going. This is the way the laws are being bent, reduced, minimized, and even diluted. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got a lot more to share with you here on this edition of the LP Zone. You're listening to a production of Private Officer International. And remember, if you're looking for body armor, protective wear, contact our friends at Body Armor USA, because we've got what it takes to protect you, and there's no doubt about that at all. Check them out online today, bodyarmorusa.com. We'll be right back.
Do you know your ABCs? How about the ABCs of water safety? A is for active adult supervision. This means someone is always actively watching when a child is in the water. B is for multiple barriers. Your pool or spa should have multiple physical barriers at all times. C is for CPR classes. Even if you're not a parent, it's important to learn CPR. Water safety is everyone's responsibility.
You wouldn't think the cafeteria would be a scary place.
There are 5.9 million kids in the U.S. living with food allergies.
It happens to me on the school bus.
And a third of kids with food allergies are bullied because of it. Right now, we're working on a cure for food allergies. Until then, there is a cure for food allergy bullying. You. Go to foodallergy.org to teach your kid about the seriousness of food allergies.
If I'm not at school, I can't get bullied.
Food allergy bullying. It's not a joke.
Welcome back to this edition of the LP Zone, the Loss Prevention Zone. Everything here is about loss prevention, retail security, asset control, uniform mall security protection, and fraud. If it's about retail, it's about us, and we're going to be talking about it. So over the last couple of years, and especially in the last 2 years, there have been outcries not to call the police on blacks or Hispanics, minorities who have committed minor crimes. As you have probably seen on YouTube and various videos where minor situations, folks have called 911. So there is some concern over police being overused for minor incidents when it comes to minorities, but some legislators have said that police should not respond, should not be called for minor crimes involving minorities because it puts them in danger, and that includes shoplifting. In fact, a story in the New York Times and just recently came out in the Washington Post about not calling 911 police when a minority commits a minor crime, to use some other source to get it resolved, whether that be just allow them to bring the merchandise back or talk to them or whatever. We know across the country that many district attorneys have turned to their constituents who oftentimes are minorities, and they have changed the law to keep low-level crimes from being prosecuted. They have worked with the legislators in the state, or if it's a ordinance, a community, county, city law, they have worked with these legislators to take the law off the book, not because of it was an unreasonable law, not because it was an overused law, but because it was a law that often affects minorities. So in Texas, the Texas prosecutors want to keep low-level criminals out of overcrowded jails, and that is simply by either not prosecuting the charges at all or trying to work with legislators to take it off the books. Dallas County District Attorney John Cruz ignited a firestorm recently when he announced that he would not prosecute some low-level crimes, including certain theft cases, shoplifting. He's among many prosecutors across the country who are turning their focus away from non-violent offenses. I just saw a documentary about the new Philadelphia DA, a white older gentleman who worked with majority and minority employees to decide which cases they would prosecute, kind of a triage like they do in the medical industry, and decide whether or not they would prosecute them. Shoplifting was one of those charges they were not going to prosecute, even when it was a substantial amount. They had to meet certain criteria before that person would be prosecuted. Across the country, we're seeing as many laws become eliminated, and the prosecution and the legislators are pushing for law enforcement to spend most of their time on major crimes and to ignore the small stuff. In other words, don't worry about the broken window syndrome. It will take care of itself. And that, we know, does not happen. But here we have retailers, and now we have loss prevention, and we have the security industry in the retail sector caught in the middle. What do? They just ignore the theft. They catch and release like they're doing down at the southern border. They make believe it didn't happen. A few years back, a company came into the picture, and they began to use a restorative justice program, and this was involving shoplifting. They would charge a certain fee to the shoplifter so they would not be prosecuted. However, after a number of years, the company received quite a bit of pushback, even some prosecutors and activists calling it extortion. Now, all of this has been spun a different way, because just recently, after they just about put the company out of business, and probably did put this one company out of business, they're now looking for ways to use restorative justice in shoplifting cases and other minor crimes. I'm all for that if the person is a first-time offender and if he complies with the program. And yeah, it might cost him $300 or $400 or $500, when you get a fine at a court or a probation or a restitution, you have to pay for your criminal acts, for your deeds. So there's always going to be some type of restitution or monetary payment, whether that be to the court or to the victim or to a third party who's trying to keep you out of jail. I believe that it's time that we decide which direction we're going to go as security professionals and business owners. What is our go-to going to be? Are we just going to use restorative justice programs? Are we going to ignore the crimes that occur? Are we just going to let people steal us blind? Check out the YouTube videos of all of the major stores, all of the groups, organized groups that are going in and stealing not a couple of hundred or even a couple of $1,000 worth of product at one time, but they're stealing $20, $30, even $50,000 right off the shelf. No employee able to stop them. Security unable to prevent them from either committing the crime or leaving the property. And if we're not going to stop them, if we're not going to be able to call law enforcement, if we're not going to be able to prosecute them, what can we do? We're putting our security staff, our mall officers, and even our business employees in harm's way for what? We need to have a direct protocol in place that we're going to stop them for any amount, or we're not going to stop them unless it's a large amount. We're going to use no force when we stop them, or we're going to use minimal force as the law allows. In every state in the United States, the law still allows for a retailer or their agent to stop a suspected shoplifter. It doesn't even say they have to be a shoplifter. They only have to be a suspected shoplifter. And yet, now we're kind of in a catch-22 situation between a rock and a hard place. What do? We are certainly looking at some serious changes in the way that we're going to have to operate. It's important that if you work in retail security, you're a district loss prevention manager, you're a store security LP or asset manager, that we begin to look at what are our challenges and how are we going to confront them? How are we going to change our policies? I know through the years, stores have already reduced what loss prevention can do. Loss prevention can no longer leave the store parking lot. Well, that's for their own protection. So that's a good thing. Loss prevention can no longer use physical force to detain a shoplifter in many cases. Loss prevention doesn't carry any weapons. Even some stores that used to allow handcuffs have taken those handcuffs away. So what's the purpose of having LP or mall security if we can't do our job? Having a good working relationship with the local police and the prosecutor will help. Working in loss prevention, I've always had the utmost respect for the decisions made by police and the prosecutor, and been very professional and had a cordial relationship with them. So when I had a case, which was many, I never had really much problem prosecuting or having police take the shoplifter into custody and transport. And, I think that's where we're going to have to start all over again. We're going to have to contact our local police. If you're in an area where they have precincts, we need to be speaking with the precinct commander. Speak with your assistant DAs and see how, we can best handle the situation that we're being given. This is a trying time. I know that we're going to face lawsuits. We're going to face more assaults, more escapes, more defiancy and non-compliant, because people know they can get away with almost anything and everything, and they have nothing to fear. That's going to do it for this edition of the Loss Prevention Zone. Be sure to join us here tomorrow for the Private Officer Beat Radio. But until then, be safe, be blessed, and we'll see you back here on the radio.